Hello, friends. This is part 2 of our long discussion about Tears of the Kingdom and its lore. Part 1 focuses mostly on the Zelda timeline and how Tears of the Kingdom fits into that. So go check that out if you haven't yet. I am your host, Capt. Bergerson.
My name is Lorulean Historian.
I'm Wiz Catches Lightning.
And let's get into it. You brought up what I'm going to say is a great segue to our next topic, the Triforce. You mentioned it's painted on Sonia's hands, or tattooed on, along with many other bits of symbolism. But there's a bit of discourse about Zelda herself and the Triforce. Some think, I've heard a lot of people say, they hate how neither Breath of the Wild nor Tears of the Kingdom has the Triforce ever shown or mentioned in it, which is a point that I'll just personally say outright I disagree with. I think Zelda has it.
I agree with your disagreement.
In both games, and it's clear as day on her hand. Again, spoiler warning, if you're still here watching this and you haven't played the game, God, why are you still here? But there's some great moments where you may remember pulling the Master Sword, and we get a nice scene of Zelda healing the Master Sword. I'm going to post these screenshots in the Discord chat here for your guys' reference, but I'll have some things edited on screen. And it's kind of hard to make out because there's so much light and bloom and stuff going on. But there's a third screenshot here where I tinkered with I didn't edit it beyond just playing around with the hue and saturation. Actually, even Mox sent me another screenshot that's straight from the credits where it's even clearer without my tinkering. But the point being that the Triforce is clear as day on her hand there. And I think that's the sacred power, as she calls it, that she is imbuing into the Master Sword in the past of Tears of the Kingdom. And I think it's the same power that she was tapping into, in Breath of the Wild to seal the Calamity, because we always see that Triforce crest on her hand. And
it's a full Triforce, which is very important to note.
Very important, because in prior games, there are some rules to the Triforce that are a little vague, and probably there are some that are beyond mortal understanding. But the crest shows on your hand when you have the Triforce, or in one instance I can think of when you have the potential to wield the Triforce, and that potential is awakened within you. But I think in this case it is the former, not the latter. That this is a power that's dwelling within her that she's tapping into. And a lot of people said, well, if she has the Triforce, why can't she just snap and solve all her problems? I think there's an issue of Zelda's mother who was also going to be her teacher, having died young, and therefore before she could learn how to use this power adequately. So she doesn't quite understand the power she's tapping into and what its potential is. But thoughts? Do you guys think Zelda has the Triforce? Do you think I'm talking nonsense and that it's just some visual flair they added? And I'll reference here, Monster Maze did a great video about this subject, talking about...
Seen it. Great video.
Great video. Honestly, that video changed my mind about some things that I had.
Me too. Yeah, it's so easy to conflate the sacred realm with the silent realm.
That was the thing, was I always imagined they were the same place. And I'd even pulled theory material on why they were. There's talk of the sacred realm also being called the Golden Land. And when you obtain the Triforce there in Skyward Sword, it literally becomes gold, the area around you. And I was like, that's it, it becomes the Golden Land. But no, he totally changed my mind about the silent realm and how it works and what it is, which I would just say to anyone watching, go watch his video. But he also makes a great case for both Skyward Sword Link and the Zelda of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom having the Triforce within them, the full, complete Triforce. I had previously believed that Zelda had it in Breath of the Wild, and at the end of the game, because she had tapped into its power, it returned to the Sacred Realm, which is why she could no longer feel her power anymore. But I think she still has it, and she's tapping into it again here to repair the Master Sword for us. So I have some thoughts about what's going on here. But what do you guys think? Do you think she has it?
Well, if you want, I have a list of kind of rules I've made about the Triforce in my head that I can kind of mention.
That's a great starting point, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, it's hard to debate whether or not she has it if we don't have those kind of rules outlined, I think. So,
yeah, for sure. It's like I made a video on this before or something.
Something like that.
And I luckily remembered a conversation I was having with a friend who I'm working on the current video with, and I pinned this message specifically because I wanted to keep track of the rules that I made in my head. But please feel free to add or amend any of the rules that I say here. Mm-hmm. Okay, rule number 1. A person must be balanced to be able to wish from the Triforce. So specifically, they have to be balanced in the virtues of power or strength, wisdom, and courage.
Right.
Rule number 2 is that the Triforce will split if the person who makes the wish on it is not balanced. Rule number 3 is that the Triforce doesn't take morality into concern. Mm-hmm. So you could technically be balanced in all 3 virtues, and you could still make a wish from the Triforce, even if you're dastardly evil. Rule number 4. The Triforce houses itself inside of the 3 individuals who most embody the virtues of strength, wisdom, or power, wisdom, and courage, if it does split and a wish was made by an unbalanced person. Mm-hmm. Rule number 5 is, this doesn't always happen, but the Triforce can disperse or disappear after a wish has been made.
Yes, as we see at the end of
we see that
Wind
happen
Waker.
in Wind Waker. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Rule number 6 is that the Triforce gets hidden away, so no one else can make a wish, or splits if it doesn't disperse or disappear. So that's all I have right now. And then I guess rule number 7 is if you're King Daphnis, you can just somehow make a wish.
So, okay, that final rule, and also rule 5, I have a bit of thoughts on why that happens.
Yeah.
In the case of like Skyward Sword, for example, Link is he balances his spirit and then brings out the full Triforce. Whether you believe he obtained it in the Sacred Realm or he was able to manifest it from within himself. Regardless,
Silent Realm, right? You meant
Silent
Realm?
And he's balanced his spirit. That's that much we can always agree on for sure.
Yeah.
He's able to make a wish on it, and it does not disperse. Meanwhile, at the end of Wind Waker, King Daphnis wishes on it. And it does.
They look a lot alike.
And I think, not to say that King Daphnis' spirit isn't balanced, but I think it is the reason for this distinction is because King Daphnis did not earn the Triforce, and Skyward Sword Link did. So King Daphnis basically cut in after the 3 pieces were united and co-opted it and then made his wish. Whereas I think in this case of Skyward Sword, because Link earned it, he was able to basically retain it after using its power. So I think there is a distinction there to be made, which is why I no longer believe also that Zelda loses it at the end of Breath of the Wild, because she didn't co-opt it. She brought it out from within herself already, like Skyward Sword Link does. King Daphnis is a weird exception, because I think also the reason it doesn't disperse to 3 chosen wielders is because it had already done that. So it had been then, what happens is if it, like you mentioned, if an imbalanced person touches it, it disperses between 3 chosen holders. And the person that touched it gets to keep the piece that their values most embody. So Ganondorf, being the one who touched it in the Sacred Realm during Ocarina of Time, kept power, and then the other 2 pieces were split between Link and Zelda. And then by the time of Wind Waker, there's new inheritors of these pieces. Well, Link didn't really inherit it. He more of cobbled it back together and claimed it. But
somebody give me some super glue.
Yeah, right. But when all 3 pieces are reunited, now they've already been split. So now they're brought back together. And now someone has one chance to make a wish on it, now that all 3 pieces have been reunited.
It's like the Dragon Balls.
Yeah, actually, that is a good way to look at it. It's a very comparable sort of thing.
I guess to your credit as well, Link in Skyward Sword technically had it inside of him, so I guess you could say that he was touching it, even though he makes the wish when it comes out of him, and he's not physically touching it. So I was just gonna give you some gray there to the black and white rules that we have. And then I guess we could explain that the Triforce splits after Daphnis does it, or makes his wish, because he wouldn't be balanced. And then I guess Ganondorf in Wind Waker had technically defeated Link and Tetra right then and there, which is why the Triforce comes together.
Right.
Yeah.
You can kind of extract it.
Yeah, he summoned it from them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There is also a point that I find interesting, is that Skyward Sword's Link, after he uses the Triforce, he then goes back in time to fight Demise, right? He doesn't bring the Triforce with him in that final battle. It stays behind the goddess statue, and it just chills there. And it chills there until even the post-credit scene of the game. So it means that this is a Link who was not just strong enough to manifest the Triforce from within himself, and then it's manifested, it's brought out, but then he's also strong enough to go back in time and kill the Demon King on his own without the Triforce. And that's just badass. So it's just pretty cool. That's all I'm saying. But
it's one of my favorite all-time final boss battles.
It's great. It's great. And that's, I think, another timeline convergence, which we talked about earlier. But the fact is that Skyward Sword Link, he kills Demise in the present, then he goes back in time and kills Demise in the past, which should then cause a paradox that causes the rest of the game not to happen. But when you return to the present, all that stuff still happened, including the goddess statue coming down to kill Demise in the present.
And including the Master Sword.
Exactly.
Being that he left it in the past.
And
then it was there when he came back through into the present.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Time travel shenanigans. So I think for me, like, that's another clear example of a timeline convergence happening due to time travel shenanigans. I think some people will say it's a cop-out, but I find it to be like a more compelling answer than just being like it's an alternate reality, and just because that feels like a like writing it off almost.
No, that's a great argument for it being one timeline that didn't split at that point or deviate into another timeline.
Mm-hmm. Which is what I think is the case, because keep in mind all of the official material, Skyward Sword onward until Ocarina of Time is referred to as the unified timeline, not the mostly unified but got split a couple times during Skyward Sword timeline. Right? So
give Nintendo 7 years to come out with another downfall timeline retcon.
Right. Yeah.
I say that in pure jest.
Right. Interesting thing, though, is with Zelda tapping into the Triforce, we know that time travel can play around with the rules of the Triforce as well, because at the end of Ocarina of Time, the reason the Triforce splits again in the child timeline is because Link had the Triforce of Courage and was sent back in time. And because he was retaining that Triforce of Courage, the Triforce had to essentially rebalance itself and split itself before Ganondorf touched it, basically. So in the adult timeline, Ganondorf's the one that split the Triforce. But in the child timeline, it's Link who did. And that's the source of the quote-unquote divine prank of Ganondorf having it in Twilight Princess, which is also why there are inheritors who start Twilight Princess off with it. Link and Zelda have their pieces to begin with. They've just always had it. Probably didn't think much of it. So maybe didn't know.
So this is a thing.
Yeah, it's just this weird thing that happens sometimes.
Why is my birthmark glowing?
Yeah. It's a weirdly symmetrical birthmark you have there. And it even, you see, like, in Ocarina of Time, it's established that when one piece's holder has the Triforce, and they're near the other pieces, like, it resonates, and you can feel that. And then, of course, fast forward to Twilight Princess, Link has courage, Zelda has wisdom, and when Midna brings Link over to Zelda, her piece resonates. She can feel the presence of the Triforce within Link. You see, there's a shot where she kind of like pans her hand over Wolf Link, and her piece, resonates.
Starts to glow.
Mm-hmm. And then she kind of pieces together like, okay, here's what's going on. Like, this is what's going on with this dog man. So with that in mind, the Triforce being a little loosey-goosey with its rules when time travel's involved, it begs the question, did Zelda lose the Triforce at the end of the Breath of the Wild? And did she regain it because she had the potential to wield it within her, and then she went into the past and is actually using the Triforce of that era to heal the Master Sword? Or did she bring it back with her? Because if she brought it back with her, then is there two Triforces, two Zeldas, and two Master Swords concurrently going through history here?
Everything you just questioned and asked, I would reason that that's how a convergence happens, so to speak, because reality has to correct itself. In the event that there would be two Triforces and two Master Swords existing at once, and
oh my god,
and Zelda is really. Do you want me to keep going with this?
Going.
Oh my god,
I'm like where you're going with this.
she's like the physical representation of the sacred realm. which is why she can turn from a dragon back to a human at the end. She's literally defying reality because the lore that we know about draconification is that it's
a one-way
irreversible.
ticket.
Yeah, it's a one-way ticket. You lose your individuality. If we were to speak in terms of ancient Japanese, I'm not sure if the Hyruleans interpreted this, but you become a god, so to speak. Zelda of Skyward Sword talks about, she talks about the gods clan, and she talks about how the gods were unable to use the Triforce. Well, if you lose your entire self, you have no agency. Like, of course you couldn't use the Triforce in that specific state of being, so to speak. Very interesting that she has both the Triforce and the Master Sword. Well, assuming that she has the Triforce with it, which I think she does. When she consumes the Secret Stone and transforms into a dragon, the area of effect golden dome that comes out of her is like 1-for-1 exactly what happens when she uses the sealing power against the Calamity Ganon.
That's true.
Like the first time in the memories of Breath of the Wild. I don't know if you guys want to add anything else.
I think you kind of imploded my mind. No, seriously. So
I got a video coming out.
Listen, she transforms into a dragon, right?
Yeah.
If she went back in time and she had the Triforce with her, and then reality reconnected everything to basically make it so that the one she had was the only one, because you can't have two.
Right.
And if the same thing happens with the Master Sword, then all three of the timelines that would come from Ocarina of Time converge because she went back in time and converged them.
Yep.
Yeah.
She literally dragon broke.
She's the dragon of the Dragon Break.
She dragon broke the timeline.
I haven't really talked to anyone about this, by the way, so you two are the first, and whoever decides to listen to this.
Oh my god.
They're gonna hear it. But
you heard it here first, folks.
Yeah.
Seriously. Yeah. Wow. This is definitely a mind imploding conversation.
And Sonia and Rauru would be the respective sages of light and time. And in order to get into the sacred realm, you have to go into the Temple of Time, which takes you to the sacred realm, or the interstitial sacred realm takes you to the Temple of Light, which is where the Triforce was like housed. And so it's really just a symbolic, like, Sage of Light, Sage of Time. What's that make Zelda? Zelda's like a human sacred realm, so to speak, in kind of like this example. And hopefully I haven't lost you.
No, not at all.
I feel like Groose. I feel like
In that
Groose
moment.
when he fell to the surface.
Just his whole world was turned upside down. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing too, is there's this whole symbology of these dual dragons in Tears of the Kingdom's logo, and in so many parts of the architecture we find in the game and it's always twin dragons, which I think represent not just the spoilers final battle of the game, but also represent less literally and more figuratively Zelda's journey through time, this loop of
definitely
two Zeldas in time.
And you might ask, well, where's the Dragon of Light in Breath of the Wild? She conveniently goes above the cloud barrier. Yep.
That was my favorite detail. I was on the couch and I squealed with glee in that moment of the opening, and it's a blink and you miss it moment. But the cloud barrier, which has been around since Skyward Sword, presumably still above Hyrule, with maybe some small gaps in it, gets dispersed by the Light Dragon, which is where the Sky Islands came from.
She also has those tears, which turn into the Tears of the Dragon quest and the memories.
Yes.
And people might challenge, well, how do these geoglyphs just appear all of a sudden if this isn't like overwritten time or like a new timeline or whatever? Well, funny thing about light is that you can actually make things visible as equally as you can make things invisible. So they didn't appear until, like, they could have always been there and didn't appear until they needed to.
Yeah. I think that's the case, and I think that's like the cloud barrier is what obscures everything. So the cloud barrier there, like the Sky Islands, were always there. They got risen into the sky in the ancient past, but they were above the cloud barrier for safekeeping. Again, history rhyming, where because Hylia previously rose an island above the cloud barrier to protect people. So they wrote, and the sages kind of repeated that act. history rhymes. That gets put above the cloud barrier, and
You can't see it, but I'm smiling.
I bet. No, me too. I'm beaming, dude. And then once the cloud barrier is dispersed, maybe more pure light can shine down on Hyrule essentially and illuminate these glyphs that were previously unseen. And it's funny again, like about this topic of NPCs not knowing what they're talking about, is all of them assume that the Sky Islands showed up because of the upheaval. They're like, oh yeah, this upheaval happened, Hyrule Castle rose up, and all these chasms opened in the ground, and these Sky Islands appeared. But they're like kind of separate events. The Sky Islands appeared because they were always there, just now they became visible with the cloud barrier being dispersed, whereas the upheaval caused all these things happening on the surface world. But again, like from the perspective of your average person living in Hyrule, you just see all these things happen at once and you assume it's one event, basically. So it's an interesting thing to think about, but when that happens, the cloud barrier dispersing, like I squealed with glee seeing that happen. I was like, oh my gosh, it's
it was awesome. Like in all senses of the word, it was awesome. And yeah, like as in terms of like where the light dragon went, when she transformed, she went up and above and into the clouds. You see like the like vortex, the little swoop as she kind of like merges and goes through it. So yeah, she's just been there chilling and the whole time waiting for Link.
Yeah.
For tens of thousands of years. And it was all there. It was always there. It just, we couldn't see it.
Yeah. It's kind of a mind bend to think of it that
Unreal.
way. That also means she had to live through the calamity again, which just sucks for her.
Yes.
So bad.
Yeah.
But like from her perspective, there's no like, because she has like no sense of self and no sense of ego or id or anything. Like I don't even know if she was even aware of what was happening anytime any historical event was going on. Like she says at the end, it was like she was asleep.
Yeah.
And
there's no sense.
And there is some sort of instinct happening.
Yeah.
You know that there's some sort of former Zelda there because she's with you in the final battle. Like you're falling every time you go and strike Dragendorf, and she's there to like pick you up and like rescue you and take you back.
Yeah.
Like obviously we're all agreeing she's not there, but like there is some sort of like level of instinct still retained. Yeah.
That final battle is so good. So much better than Dark Beast Ganon.
It's so cinematic. I love like the aesthetic, the cinematics of it. Like just rising up and then awesome. Falling down. It's like
it's gorgeous too. It's actually another train of thought too, is if Zelda's imbuing the Master Sword with the power of the Triforce. First of all, this sword is so powerful now. It's been bathed in goddess flames, blessed by goddesses, or blessed by Hylia, and then now it's been blessed with the Triforce, imbued. It looks like in that scene, like the power of the Triforce is like seeping into the sword and drawing it out and repairing it. And that to me is the explanation of a couple things. One is how the sword is strong enough to destroy a secret stone, because Link uses the Master Sword to, in a very Twilight Princess moment, strike Ganon's secret, or Ganon Dragon's secret stone and shatter it. And these are like insanely powerful god relics, right? But also how it's strong enough to not be broken again by Ganon, because in the pre-final battle, when you fight Ganondorf at the end game, he's not able to break the sword, which he was able to do at the beginning of the game easily, but then in that final battle he can't. And at first that kind of bothered me until I went and like rewatched all the memories and kind of was like soaking it in. And I'm like, the only way to make this sword stronger, especially strong enough to resist that, is the Triforce, I think. And it's like basically the reality bending power, the be all to end all, right? So
yeah,
it makes sense.
Quite the MacGuffin / Deus Ex Machina plot device. It's interesting when she becomes a dragon too, because it, in a way, it parallels like the myth that we know about Hylia being like left in charge of both the Triforce and kind of like forging the Master Sword, because Zelda, for all intents and purposes, ascends into godhood at that point. She kind of like loses herself, which aligns with like Eastern mythology. Like Eastern mythology doesn't, like Buddhism, Shintoism specifically, in order to transcend samsara, the endless cycle of death and rebirth, you have to you don't necessarily have to be morally good. You just have to leave your attachments that make you stay in this realm, on this plane of existence.
Yeah.
So
you
she
have to lose
in a way,
yourself.
in a way she detaches herself from everything that would keep her as a Hylian if she exists in samsara, which we know she kind of does. And then there's these 3 dragons before her, and they are all cleverly named with names similar to Ferore, Din, and Nehru. And she has the Master Sword with her. She's reforging it, or giving it new life. And we've all agreed that she has the Triforce with her. So I make a point in my video, or sorry.
No,
I make a
plug
point
away.
that what would I asked the question, what would you call that dragon? What name would you give that dragon? I would call that dragon Hylia.
Hylia. And
Because it's
funny too, because
such a
in way,
parallel.
It's cyclical. Hylia, when she gives up her divinity, as it were, and reincarnates as the Zelda of Skyward Sword, she doesn't have her memories of her past life. She has to go to awaken those. So in a way, she loses herself to her mortality in that time. And then now, this Zelda, who is descended of Hylia, loses herself again in her divinity, in her immortality. Again, it's these 2 dragons. It's cyclical, but it's extremely fascinating as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was gonna say, this also kind of explains, someone theorized, this is why we see a bunch of pose in the depths. If we're assuming that all 3 timelines have merged into one convenient timeline, because there's these souls from pre-existing split timelines that had nowhere else to go. And so in a way, the depths kind of act as a spam folder for of souls that are trapped. They haven't moved on into an afterlife because they are from pre-existing timelines. Breath of the Wild, that ceremony.
Right.
Lorulean, I messaged you about this a couple days ago because I wanted to make sure it was on point. But the ceremony acknowledges all 3 timelines. It acknowledges, Skyward Sword with the, whether in the sky, adrift through time, or in the embers of twilight. There's the child timeline. And then in the Japanese version, what's his name? The Goron and Rivali say, crossing the ancient sea, the golden triangles, or the sacred golden triangles, be with the hero, which acknowledge the adult timeline and the downfall timeline. So it's it's mere legend because it's a remembered history. It's a dragon break with a dragon close, or whatever you want to call it. Convergence is what I usually call it.
Convergence.
With everyone remembering history differently.
Yeah.
In a way, but it's all a shared remembrance of that history. And I was gonna also say, in the depths, this also can kind of explain why we get these pristine weapons that aren't affected by gloom. If you look at the depths, there's gloom everywhere.
Yeah.
There's no reason why these weapons should not be tarnished. It's really interesting. The silhouettes of the people that give you the weapons look exactly like the character models for the Hylian royal soldiers.
Yeah.
They have the plumes and the helmet
helmets
structure,
and
everything.
Yeah.
And when they hand you these pristine weapons, they're almost like weapons from other timelines that weren't affected by the gloom or the upheaval,
That's the
so to
Dark
speak.
World.
Also,
That's the
Moxie!
Dark World.
welcome.
Alright.
Mox.
Sorry, I set alarms.
Good morning.
I don't know if I just
Most people would say good afternoon.
slapped them off or I don't know. But hello, I'm here.
We had some good
Welcome, Mox. We're so glad you're here. We have been in it. We have been elbow deep in lore. Well, I'm trying to think of the cliff notes to bring up to speed. We had a bit of a couple different ideas about timeline placement. We all agree Zelda's a Triforce, and she is the dragon that Dragon broke the Dragon break in the timeline because she's back in time. There's 2 Triforces, 2 Zeldas, 2 Master Swords, and a lot of rebalancing that needed happening.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, that's the cliff notes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the second, because as soon as Zelda goes back, right? I mean, I'm sure you guys have already established this. As soon as she goes back, she rewrites history.
fucks everything up.
She
again.
fucks everything up.
But-
Because she goes back and then she literally changes events. She gives the Puripad to Minoru. She like orders the sages to do stuff. It's like she's literally changing events.
The second Minoru's like, let me see if I can get this teleportation working with our technology. That's like the primary change point.
Yeah, that's the big one, is when she hands the Puripad to Minoru.
Right. Although, but it still happened,
And yet,
which is
all of that history happened in the history of Breath of the Wild, and like the world of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. We had touched upon that. So the thing is, like, if she was already predestined or predetermined, or however you want to word it, where she is going to go back in time and she's going to have those tools in her toolkit. She's going to have the Triforce in her possession as her incredible sacred power.
First, the
Master Sword is going to come. Yeah, the Puripad's going to come back with her. She has the secret stone, which was originally light but became time, in her possession. And then the Master Sword comes to her, and all of this is taking place at like one of the most extreme ends of the timeline compared to where she was coming from, and it was always predetermined. And if reality has to bend itself to make that a reality, then she has converged all of these histories and all of the timelines that would have originally taken place before she went back.
Right. So we've got,
and that it had already happened, and it's like that blows my mind.
So we've got like a unified timeline. We've got a split. We've got a child, adult, and a downfall timeline. And then we have, what were we calling it? The convenient timeline of... Is that what you called it, Wiz?
Yeah. Hey, there wasn't a deviation. This is all one still. It's unified.
It's all
Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, all the strings are brought in together, and it's wild. We could call it the wild timeline, but the convenient timeline is funnier. So... The Triforce. Okay, so that actually in 2.5 hours we managed to get through 2 topics.
Nice.
Which is great.
It's big topics.
They are big topics, which is why I wanted to start with those ones.
I'm actually surprised we didn't take more time.
You know what? That's a good point. That we probably could, but
talking for 2.5 hours just about the Triforce, Zelda, and the timeline.
Yes.
Oh my god.
So when this video goes live, Mox, you have some catching up. You have some homework.
Oh yeah, no, I figured.
This might actually be more than one video at this rate, but we'll see. I think of the pool of topics, I think we could shift over to... Actually, the one that I have here is the Zonai, the Sky, and Hylia, and how it all relates. I feel like that kind of got meshed in with everything else we already talked about.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
I
makes
think
sense.
That's safe to just say it got eaten by the other topics. I had this one specifically per Mox's request, and since Mox is now here, and we were just talking about the depths being this sort of spam folder for reality as this timeline convergence happens. Let's talk about the bargainers, because they're these interesting, enigmatic beings of very strange power, supposedly there to guide Pose to the afterlife, but I think there's more to them than what they're maybe letting on. And that will be the topic of discussion for part 3 of this lengthy discussion that we recorded. Thank you all so much for sticking through part 2 here, where we talked about the Triforce, and stay tuned for part 3. Thank you again to Mox, Lorulean Historian, and Wiz for joining me in this discussion, and I hope you all enjoyed listening. Thank you all so much for watching, and an extra big thanks goes to my supporters across both Patreon and here on YouTube as a channel member. So thank you to Greymage, Brenda, Tetra, Hylian Wes, Justin, Midnight Naomi, and Bunny, as well as so many more people, the names of which you're seeing on screen here. Thank you all so much for all of the support. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.